the theme Uganda's Unending Quest for Credible, Free and Fair Elections. Yesterday we heard from 4 groups. So today, this morning, we are starting with, we're picking up from where we stopped, and that is group 5. So we shall have group 5 here on the podium. I will invite Kagoro Enoch, Mountains of the Moon University. Please come and take your seat. From Gulu University, we have Ogenrot Elisha Kakanyero. Please come over. Mbarara University School of Science and Technology, Mohanji Edward. Edward, you're most welcome. Then we also have from Busitema University, Nuamanya Mugisha Evans. Evans, please come over here. Then we have Kabale University, Kayua Ashraf. So Kagoro Enoch, Ogenrot Elisha, Mohanji Edward, that's you. Nuamanya Mugisha, that's you, and Ashraf. So, it's an all-male panel. Okay, so gentlemen, good morning. Good to have you. So the rules, I'll read for you the rules once again. Can I just borrow from you? I'll bring it back. So we've made a few changes, but the major change is that you are doing 3 questions, and we're giving you 1 hour, okay? Yes, you have 1 hour for that. First and last minutes are still protected, as it was. That hasn't changed. And in the 8 minutes, panelists can interrupt each other with questions, points of information and order. And then if we have time, we can open up the floor for plenary. But if we do not have time, you'll have to bear with us, okay? Does that settle it? So your questions are slightly different from yesterday's. Not still within the theme of elections. So the first question is, how did colonial era policies shape Uganda's electoral systems and political landscape post-independence? How did colonial era policies shape Uganda's electoral systems and political landscape post-independence? Do I have to repeat that once more? Okay. How did colonial era policies shape Uganda's electoral systems and political landscape post-independence? Are we good? Okay. So we're going to start in just a few seconds from now. Yes, they are. So I will repeat it again for the judges. From the extreme left, we have Mountains of the Moon University, Kagoro Enoch. Next to him, Ogenrot Elisha Kakanyero from Gulu University. Next to Gulu University is Mbarara University School of Science and Technology, and that's Edward Mohanji. Then we have from Busitema University, Nuamanya Mugisha Evans. And then the last in the white shirt is Kayua Ashraf from Kabale University. Our judges this morning, we have Professor Mambusi Ndebesa, a political historian. You can clap for them, yes. Okay. So the judges have made a request that we rearrange how you're seated so that they follow a certain format. So I will ask you to shuffle a bit. So Busitema University will go to the first. Yeah, no, you change. So Busitema University, Nuamanya Mugisha Evans is number 1, followed by Gulu University. You'll take the second seat. Again, wrote Elisha. Kabale University, you'll take the third seat, seat number 3. Then Mbarara University of Science and Technology, 4. Yeah, then Mountains of the Moon. You're okay. Okay, great. Fine. Thank you. So our judges, the order is according to what you have on the script. I guess we are set. I'll still introducing our judges. Ms. Fatoumata Toure is also here with us again today, and Council Michael Aboneka. Thank you very much. Let's give a hearty applause to our judges for this session. So it's 8:45, and by 9:45 we have to be done. So I will start with Nuamanya Mugisha Evans from Busitema University. How did colonial era policies shape Uganda's electoral systems and political landscape post-independence? Microphone.
Hello everyone, Busitema University, Nuamanya Mugisha Evans. So let us give context to this kind of question and understand that in 1894, when Gerard Poto came here and he was trying to explore the landscape of Uganda, what he did was to establish that Uganda could be a protectorate. And when the British actually came, they found that it would be easier to handle this kind of territory by 2 things. One was indirect rule, and that indirect rule brought in the idea of collaborators. And the collaborators were the selfish men that were willing to trade their societies for a pity, for only a penny. And you see, for a reflective glass, a man could sell off the whole land and become a chief somewhere else in titles. And that alone, first of all, sowed the seed that even today we are still harvesting fruit from. You find that politicians, even now, are willing to trade everything to win a certain political stance or a political position, not because they have the heart for that society, but because it at least adds something to them. That selfishness was first seen in the 1800s or in the early 1900s with the idea of collaborators. Let us understand also that these systems, when they came here, they needed a certain way of having all systems to themselves, and therefore they brought in the idea of the divide and rule policy. Now, the divide and rule policy was when they pitched a society against another, and we see that later in 1967 and 66 we have a crisis in Buganda because they are quarreling. We have a referendum over the Buyaga and Buganga is the lost counties, and you see this conflict alone is highly definitive of the politics that we have today, that even after there had been a selfish collaboration between the Uganda People's Congress and the Kabaka Eka in the earlier elections, at this time they were now being split over something that had been birthed many years ago. So you see that kind of selfishness now even had to break up something that had come in already. So you see how it has affected the post-independence, and it does not just stop there. You see, we have become a society that is largely selfish. When it benefits me, I do not care how it is going to affect the others, because that kind of selfishness profits me at the moment. You see, and that is what we are suffering from as a country. It is a cancer that has eaten up our politicians, that they are willing to change political parties up to 20 times as long as they get a higher bidder on their side. You see, now politics has become guaranteed business of success, that I'm going to bet on being a member of, I'm going to put pressure on the NRM government, but when they offer me a certain token as the highest bidder, I'm going to take it up. You see? So that kind of effect has been seen over the days, and it has sowed that greed that is affecting our politics today. It has brought in all the conflict and war that we saw in the more recent or in the more past history just after independence, and we are still suffering that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's Nwamanya Mugisha Evans from Busitema University. Let's now move to Gulu University, represented by Ogenrot Elisha Kahanyaro. Elisha, the same question goes to you. How did colonial era policies shape Uganda's electoral systems and political landscape post-independence? And your time starts now.
Okay, good morning everyone. I'm Kakanyaro Elisha Ogenrot from Gulu University. So one thing is constant from all the conversations that we have had here is the fact that colonial rule basically had policies that dwelled or used a lot of divide and rule policy, right? Like they united on, they benefited a lot from making sure that we are disunited as citizens of Uganda or as Ugandans. And that was not just by making sure that Buganda was like a superior kingdom. They had other settings that made sure that, you know what, at the end of the day, these people were kind of separated. For starters, there were schools that were specifically for royals, and there were schools that were for like the normal people. But then that aside, there were also schools that were for Catholics, and there were schools that were for Protestants, and schools that were for Muslims. You get, like this kind of divisions actually led to, you know, cultural wars and things like that existing within our systems. But then it didn't end at like those schools or societal settings. This eventually led to like the formation of parties that were formed basically for members of a certain religion, or for members that subscribed to, for members of a certain religion, or for members of a particular region and stuff like that. And that eventually led to the favoritism or the demand of Buganda Kingdom for the federal state. For instance, when we moved to 1962, when we go to like the Lancashire House for like the negotiations to come up with the past constitution of Uganda, Buganda Kingdom demands for some level of federalism, right? And that is actually experienced or exhibited in, you know, us having a bicameral system of governance, where at the end of the day, Edward Mutesa becomes like the federal head of state as the president because he's the king of the Buganda Kingdom, and then Milton Obote becomes, you know, the political head of the government by becoming the president and things like that. That meant that the political era actually created systems that, one, disunited us as Ugandans, but then secondly, it also created a certain level of favoritism. But then that did not end at that. Most times when we talk about democracy, we all know that democracy, especially using first past the post system that we use in Uganda, dwelt on like the aggregate of decisions that people make. And these decisions basically rely on the agency of people, right? Like the ability of people to choose between what they believe is actually right for them and what they do not believe that is right for them. The problem with this is that at the end of the day, from the systems that we have built, the disunity that they've built, the divide and rule policy, it actually created identity politics that exists in Uganda even to this particular point in time. The identity politics kind of actually looks like people subscribing to political parties or making decisions voting for political parties or politicians, mostly because these are people of the who are wine from their regions, or there are people who subscribe to political parties that basically their religion supports and stuff like that. We have noticed this over time from 1989, in the 1989 when Ruakana Rugunda has a tie in like the NRC elections, with Bob Chitaraka, and then some two Catholic priests tell other people to move from Bob's line and then come to Ruakana Rugunda's line because he's a Catholic and stuff like that. This basically has had an influence impacting the decisions that people make in like a negative kind of manner. People try to make decisions to vote for like the best things that benefit them, but it doesn't exactly rely on like the best manifestos that people bring to them. They vote mostly because this is someone who is from the region that I'm from, this is someone who is from, you know,
Elisha,
who subscribes to a political party that I'm from and stuff like that.
Your time is up. Thank you. But there is a hand up for you from Mountains of the Moon University. Kagoro Enoch.
I'm just inquiring from my brother. What do you think leads or informs the rise of these political parties?
The rise of the political parties. Let's start with the first three political parties that we had in Uganda, right? Democratic Party was basically a party that was formed and backed by like the Catholic faith. Uganda People's Congress was a party that was formed and backed by like the Anglican faith. Kabaka Yeka was a party that was formed in 1962 because the Baganda actually protested like the 1961 elections, and they believed that, you know, the Kabaka was supposed to be superior, and 1961 kind of ignored this position and stuff like that. That basically just goes ahead to show you that the original parties that were formed to strengthen the disunity that already existed or colonial systems actually benefited from and capitalized on. That is like the foundation body of the politics that happen in Uganda. Any other question?
No, it's fine. We can proceed. Thank you. Thank you. Let's go to Kabale University, represented by Kayuwa Ashraf. Ashraf, how did colonial era policies shape Uganda's electoral systems and the political landscape post-independence?
Thank you so much.
3 minutes.
My name is Kayuwa Ashraf from Kabale University, and I carry greetings from the University Without Walls over to you. To begin with, it is quite interesting to have such a motion and such discussion in front of you guys, because it is very paramount to know we cannot discuss the politics or the Ugandan politics without maintaining our fact that we have our colonial masters, and that's to be bleating in, to be specific. We have to now to reflect back, and I have to first give a context of what is happening even right now. The good thing, we are in an election era, we are in a political era. That's the season that we are in right now. We are seeing whatever is happening is completely manifesting what happened in those days, and that thing was propagated. That was a nursery bed. The colonial era policies are a nursery bed to whatever is happening right now. What do I mean by this? We have seen politics of religion, and I think maybe it may not be worse in other parts of the country, but then we are very sure that the Protestants, we are favored by the British colonial masters, and that manifests as to why there was the boycotting of the elections, whereby DP, which had the minority of the Catholics, was like, why is it that these people are doing this, and then yet we are being sidelined? Then we remember you had the minorities of the Muslims and other religions which are sidelined, and this has still happened in the current trend, whereby now to have a political position, to have a political stand, now churches have turned it into political grounds, and if you cannot, because there is no way you can stop that, because that was propagated by our very own colonial masters, whereby we had seen people that were being favored, and whenever you would be a Muslim by then, should we think we didn't have Muslims by then who could become too vibrant to rule any political party? Of course no, because we had people, the colonial masters had propagated a spirit that there are some religions that are more superior than others compared to that. And that is very obvious, because now, recently in Rwanda, go there, I have to give in live examples in Chigezi. A Catholic priest comes onto the top of the podium instead of preaching unity, and he's telling you, please, if you do not vote Honorable Musasizi, we shall not count anything in you. Why? Honorable Musasizi comes in for, even these people brought in a thing of who contributes most, who brings what on the table. Comes for the fundraising ceremony of a church, says, I have given you the roofings of the whole church. And then you, who is the protest, who are you to come and say you want to contest against Moses, who is giving worth billions, the whole Catholic Church, and then you think you will have to win an election? Of course, the bishop will have to stand boldly and tell you, please vote Moses. Unless you do that, he will have to ask, last time I came, how many votes did I get at the polling station? Of course, I got nothing, so what do you want from me? And that's very obvious. I think that should not be debatable. And then, to also add on that, they also brought in an error whereby there was separation according to class of elites, whereby what qualifications did you have to rule? Because we believe that leadership...
Your time is up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
30 seconds.
But you have a question from your colleague from Busitema University, Noamanya Mugisha.
Couldn't that very idea of a certain gentleman supporting a church activity, couldn't that be anyone, even away from their religions? Because there are incidences where someone subscribing to religion A comes to a fundraising ceremony of religion B and raises and puts a brick, or like they love to call it, and then somehow, because of that personal thing, even away from religion, couldn't it be other factors except religion?
Thank you so much for that question, but still, I have to be honest with you and tell you, they say charity begins at home. there is no way how a Muslim will stand in front of a podium or a church altar with you. We are doing something, even though you contribute even the construction of the whole church. But you remember, a homeboy remains a homeboy. And of course, we have to make sure, and we have to know that you have to be favored most compared to someone who has come in as a stranger. There is no way how someone, even though you contribute, what it is very obvious. We should now leave alone that what he has said, and come back to ground and know which is what is happening wrong. May have been in this issue, I know what it means, so whatever I'm speaking, it is not out of reading what, but it is a fact. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashraf. Your colleague, there's another question from Gulu University. Elisha?
I don't think it's exactly a question, it's some sort of a point of information, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who comes to a church to contribute or who goes to a religion to contribute, but as long as you have made some significant contribution and then the church kind of backs you or the religion backs you, it kind of influences the agency of these people. It gives them a limited pool of options that they're supposed to make to, and that in itself has some negative influence when it comes to democracy, because democracy is supposed to be about the free will of someone, not when you try to coerce someone to make a decision.
And another question for you. You can respond to that, and then we get one last, there's one hand here.
Can I answer? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Still, and that's how, I think you're answering my question, and I think you're understanding what I was trying to bring out. In a way that you are like, doesn't that hinder the democracy? And then that's still now you're answering my very question, which is like, now I'm trying to bring out how these colonial era policies that we have brought before are tapping our current political landscape, and that is to a negative impact, by the way. So now you have understood it very well. So these policies are now the ones that are dishampering our policies, because now if it would be democratic, those leaders would have not been given podiums to campaign to that. Actually, they would be preaching democracy and everything. But yes, the reverse is true. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let us now move to our fourth debater, Mohanji Edward from Mbarara University of Science and Technology. And your question is still the same. How did colonial era policies shape Uganda's electoral systems and the political landscape post-independence?
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I think for clarity, we ought to understand one thing, that history wears a modern suit. To say that the policies that colonial masters used to rule Uganda currently influence what we live in. To start with, we must agree that the colonial masters used the idea of maybe granting absolute power to one political party or one individual in a state. It looks like one person in that kind of regard had the authority to kind of influence a lot. Today, that is manifested in the way that we see the current president or the current ruling party has got absolute authority to majority staff. That looks like he can influence a lot in the state, copying from what transpired in the past. That looks like whatever they have been arguing about falls into that category. That's why we see maybe these people who are already in authority have got a lot of power in that they influence a lot. To say they kind of suppress the minority citizen because that is something that maybe arose from the past. But two, we must agree that our colonial masters use representative democracy, which looked like people were represented, right? That sort of thing actually again happens today. How? In the way that maybe up to now, we look at people representing us. That creates a sort of competition in the way that maybe we have to go on and elect individuals to rule us. The impact of that today is that it creates a lot of competition. For instance, that maybe we see people, what they're arguing about right now, like people coming up to campaign in such and whatever cause. But again, that should be related to the fact that maybe it came from the colonial masters. But three, we must agree that our colonial masters ruled us by divide and rule, but two, keeping us poor. For example, they overtaxed the local citizen to make sure they remain desperate to poverty. That looks like, even up to now, the current regime always fights hard to make the absolute Ugandan poor. That's why you see Karamoja being poor, Chigeza and so on. It looks like these people remain desperate ruling government, like that, like they can't define what it looks like. The impact of that today is that most of what we're looking at today, for example, for taxation, the coffee bill, fishing along lakes, originates from the past because they are here to make us poor, to ease their rule. The impact of that is that I'm showing you that all these that are happening right now, they originate from the past. But three, I want to show you the idea of absolute control of power. Again, this began from the colonial masters. For example, the British granted absolute power to the ruling regime to say that the ruling party had absolute power to determine whatever happened in the state. It looks like right now, again, we live in the same category. In simple terms, we are living in the shadow of history. How? Because right now, we see absolute power being guaranteed to the state. For example, we see the president and ruling party, they contain a lot of power to determine what we feed, what we take in, what we wear, through overtaxation, through keeping us poor, through maybe controlling the opposition. To say opposition is continuing to be suppressed. Why? Because absolute power looks like you have to determine where Chagulanyi goes, you have to determine where Muntu goes. That kind of impact shows you that maybe the state has got, like, they're controlling each and every step. It is important for us to understand that maybe all these things originate from the past. Whatever problems we are having right now go on to originate from our colonial masters. The impact of this is whatever we're facing right now, for example.
Your time is up. Oh. Your time is up, but you do have two of your colleagues. Kabale University, is that a question or a point of information? Then we shall also hear from Gulu University.
It's an inquiry. Yes. Thank you so much. Should I think the current government or the government that we have now is completely or attributed to the current rates of poverty in Karamoja? Or
that is true, because I've shown you that through overtaxation, like you are any party, any ruling government, you have to keep your subordinates poor to make them submissive, to make them vote for you. It looks like if you keep people poor, even if government goes to Karamoja and they give them a simple water pump, they are going to vote for it. That's exactly what happened in the historical perspective. So to answer your question, it is true that most of cities in Uganda are poor because of the current regime, because of what they are doing to them. Thank you.
Gulu University, Hogan Roth, I saw your hand up, and then Busitema. Mugisha, you'll be next.
I basically have two questions. One is the fact that at no point in time did our colonial masters give anyone absolute powers. For instance, yeah, the Buganda kingdom was made like the most powerful kingdom within the country, but still they subscribed to, the colonial masters, and they had to get, commands from that side and then respond to and respond to them and stuff like that. But then also, when they were leaving the country in 1962, they actually gave a bicameral system. That is to say, the power didn't reside with only the political arm of the government. There was also still like the federal arm of the government. That is to say, the distributed power. But then on your issue of poverty, saying that it is going to arise to more votes for the government just because they have given a bar of salt, there's something that is called backlash. It exists in markets, it exists in politics, it exists in governance. That is to say, if you're overtaxing your citizens, if you're keeping them in a situation of poverty, they are always going to stand up and uprise and rebel your government and probably try to vote you out of power. That looks like citizens of Tanzania right now going to protest against their president because the opposition leaders have actually been all put in jail. That means that if the government was actually really putting people in desperate positions, people would actually stand up against such governments or not vote for them in the long run.
Okay, let him respond. Let him respond first, and then we move back to you.
All right, for clarity, there is a reason to why NRM wins in Karamoja and Kigezi, yet they are the poorest. What I was trying to show you is that once you keep people poor, they always appreciate the minimum you give them. It looks like if you already make me submissive in the way that maybe you don't give me what I need, even if you give me a bar of salt, I appreciate it. There is a given reason to why, again, we see, like for example, right now in northern Uganda, the current regime ruling party is then mobilizing people. These people are the poorest, but whatever they give them is kind of minimum. So the analysis on that, it looks like now there is nothing like maybe buy out and maybe people writing. That is wrong, because I've already shown you government strategies like overtaxation to keep these individuals poor. So I don't think that is right. But two, on the idea of absolute power of colonial masters, his understanding is currently wrong. Why? Because I've shown you these people ruled in the way that the ruling party or the person in charge had the authority to appoint leaders, number one, but two, to divide the state into provinces. It looks like either way, his powers were unquestionable. That's why we see even right now, the ruling party of the current state goes on to demarcate districts into local maybe states. It looks like maybe it has the power to create new districts to favor its own maybe manifestos, to say maybe they want to create strongholds for their ruling party.
Okay, let's give the mic to, I'm not giving you the mic now, Ashraf, because you've already spoken. So let's take the mic to Busitema University. Mugisha, very quickly, and then we move to the next
I stand to reinforce correction. I think we should draw a line between the government and the ruling party. You see, the government which you are talking about is actually obliged to help the citizens out of poverty. You see, it is the mandate of the government to protect the interests of the citizens. So when you come and accuse the government as a system that is actually trying to suffocate its people in poverty, then you are contradicting. The problem that we'd rather concentrate on is the understanding of how the ruling party has actually masqueraded as the whole government. So I think that most of the things that are being suggested on this panel are not supposed to be directed to the government or the executive, but rather supposed to be directed to the detriment of the encroachment of the government by the ruling party. I stand to correct that.
Okay, let him respond, and then we move to Mountains of the Moon.
The problem with that man is that he wants to argue about a hypothetical world. In simple terms, he's running away from the truth. What I've shown you is that right now, you are here, whatever you're doing is not affiliated to what the ruling party is doing to you. It becomes absolutely wrong for you to think, because maybe you want to assume that maybe you know stuff, it becomes wrong for you to think that whatever you're arguing is not an impact of government. Why? Because if you were government, right, maybe you would have gotten better. But what I've shown you is that whatever you're feeding to right now, you are here right now, whatever I think you get right now is influenced directly by the ruling party. That's why they impose taxes on you. That's why they influence what you feed and maybe the education you get. That's wrong for you to think maybe this is kind of wrong.
Thank you, Edward. Thank you. Let's now move to debater number 5, Kagoro Enoch from Mountains of the Moon University.
Thank you, moderator. My name is Kagoro Enoch from Mountains of the Moon University, Fort Portal. I'll start on that very point, moderator, where they say the government and the ruling party. I think we cannot differentiate a ruling party from government, because ruling party is ruling government. Government is, we cannot detach a party that has lasted for 40 years and we say it's not government. That's government. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having government and opposition. That is the same thing, and we can't detach anything from that. But also on that very question, Madam Moderator, first of all, about the colonial era policies and how they shape and continue to shape Ugandan policies and how we run the politics of this country. I'll start on the point of how these colonialists came. How did they come? Through missionaries, through softening the hearts of these of Ugandans, and that's how even Ugandan politics are starting now. Up to now, we're still coming through roots of liberation, roots of patriotism, because we can now hear our affiliations of patriotism, and because people think there should be need and there should be a call or a fight.
Can we be quiet? We're having only one debate up here, so I'll request
and there
you
should
to
be a
really
fight or a call to
slow.
liberation, and everybody keeps pushing for liberation, 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 and liberation. Now, how did the colonial masters handle issues in their ways, and how is it influencing us in this aspect? I'll take it in about 8 or so folds. And number 1, did they develop democracy? Of course not. What did they do? They centralized powers in a few, and that's how we still run the country up to now, because power has to belong to a few, and then the others have to be subordinates, and then there is now the issue of rulers versus subjects, and we have to go by that, and that's how we still run through that kind of system. But also number 2, the centralization of the powers into the hands of a few. That is how we still run this country, where you find one person or one tribe having the top positions, and then the others being subordinates, and then that kind of running influenced by the political era. Then also the other about the representative politics through the colonial policies, but also how it affects us now. You remember in the 1948 when we only had 3 representatives within the colonial masters eras, and then in the 1958 when we had to now keep pushing for more representatives, and that's when we are now pushed to the 8 more representatives that had to be elected. Now up to now, people still feel they are not well represented, but you and I will agree that people that, for example, I come from Fort Portal. Now Fort Portal, 15 years ago or so, it was 20 years ago, it was Chenjojo, Chegegwa, Fort Portal, Kabarole, Kamweng, and that was one district. Now, that one district had 2 or so representatives, but up to now, right now, we have over 30 representatives from that particular area. In fact, we have about 50 representatives from that particular area. But we feel we're less represented now when we have more than we were when we had less, when we had 1 or 2. And that is what we keep pushing for. More representation, because people keep pushing for more liberation, but also the issue of regions and the divisions. You realize that these I'm timing myself. I don't know how much time we're using.
Your time is up, actually.
Alright.
Your time is up.
All right.
So let us move to the next question. Time, guys, it's time. No, when you also mama and you drag, okay? You drag the process. So that's why I need us to be as respectful of this debate as possible.
Moderator, just a minute. We kindly request to know what time we're using such that we
3.
plan.
We are having 3 minutes.
Oh,
Yes, 3
okay.
minutes. Yeah. So we don't want to have what we had yesterday. You want to leave here at midnight? No, I don't think any of us wants that. So let's go to the next question. To what extent have electoral reforms since independence addressed issues of representation, fairness, and inclusivity? I'll repeat. To what extent have electoral reforms since independence addressed issues of representation, fairness, and inclusivity? To what extent have electoral reforms since independence addressed issues of representation, fairness, and inclusivity? Are we good to go? Okay. Just so that we don't confuse our judges, we're still going to follow the same order. I would have loved to shuffle it a little bit, but that's how it is going to be, unfortunately. So again, we shall start with Busitema University, represented by Nuamanya Mugisha Evans. Evans, your 3 minutes start.
When you look at the kind of politics that we are having today in Uganda, I think this question is directly talking about Uganda. Now, let us try to draw a representation of what Ugandan politics looks like. You will find, ladies and gentlemen, that a certain particular group of people have a certain untilted advantage over the others. Let us understand, ladies and gentlemen, that the kind of politics that we are working in or around today is a politics that is only a mascara. The gentleman put it right, that it is wearing just a suit. So what electoral reforms are only an application of cosmetics on what the real situation is. Let us understand that for the idea of fairness, even after the electoral reforms, let us understand that in 2005, that was an implementation of the electoral reforms that brought on board the multi-party system. But then, ladies and gentlemen, that was only to increase the participation. But was that actually increasing participation, knowing that a government had had an advantage for over 2 decades before this kind of system came in? You find that it was actually responding to the tactical consent of a certain party before this was brought forth. So that kind of electoral reform might have looked at an increase of participation, but it was actually a tactic of the party that was actually in power at the time to actually reinforce its rule and become better. Let us understand that on the issue of inclusivity, even after electoral reforms, we have seen, ladies and gentlemen, that persons, whereas they can now take, whereas the representation has been split up and many people are coming on board to be represented in different and various groups, you will still find that the listening ear to these different groups is not actually the same. So on the issue of fairness and inclusivity, we still find that there is a very big loophole today. You find, ladies and gentlemen, that at the end of the day, when you talk about the idea of electoral reforms and what their intention is, you find that whereas they have had a good spirit, even in writing, for them to be brought forth, it is very beautiful. But like I said, it is only cosmetological application and mascara to improve the beauty, but there is actually no transition in the heart of this democracy and politics. And that is why the politics of Uganda, even today, still suffers the very vices that they cried over, the untilted, how the government or how the ruling party is utilizing the resources of the government to run their own agenda in campaigns. That how even when they wanted to make them, even when we want to make it fair, it just does not work out. And besides, the adoption of electoral reforms is also a very reluctant thing. First, in the establishment of them as laws, and 2, in their observance in execution. So you find that the fairness is largely lacking, the inclusivity is largely lacking, and even the representation is highly masqueraded as participation, and that is not electoral reform transformation.
Thank
That's
you. Thank you, Evans. Let's now move to Gulu University. Again, wrote Elisha. Do I have to repeat the question? You have it. So in your 3 minutes also start right now.
All right, so basically the three reforms that we have had is one, bringing in the constitution, shifting from the movement approach of elections to like the multi-party system, right? From like just an overlook of the multi-party system, you would think one, this would actually increase inclusivity, increase representation and fairness. Why? Because at the end of the day, it would make elections accessible, right? Because political parties are now going to sponsor their candidates so that they're in position to campaign, reach out to their constituents and have them voted for, or also just incentivize people to vote for them. Why? Because at the end of the day, if you subscribe to a political party, you have more reason to participate in an election to make sure that your political party goes through. Or it could make elections more of like inclusive and stuff like that and increase accountability. Why? Because if there are multiple parties, it would mean that there's always someone who is out to call out the government or hold the government accountable through like the opposition political parties that we have had over time. These are like the benefits that you would imagine would come from having a multi-party system or that reform, right? But then here's the catch. Those things do not exist, or if they do exist, they only happen to a minimal level. Why? Because the multi-party system has been let's say a form of weapon, or has been weaponized by the government. Why? Because it's basically been used to increase like the incumbency dominance. How is this possible? Because at the end of the day, we have the incumbent government actually using state resources and things like that to sponsor their politicians, to sponsor their campaigns, moving around the country, and most of the times they're in position to actually vote most of the MPs to come from like the ruling party. That necessarily means that most of the policies that go through our parliament and come through are policies that are not a representation of literally everyone, right? But they are policies that are representation of the will of the ruling government. That is to say, most of the MPs are going to vote just because they subscribe to NRM, and it's because it's a policy that NRM wants to go through. But then also, the multi-party system has actually been used as a system of oppression. Why? Because now you know someone who is having actually a higher chance of competing against the president, someone who is having higher chance of causing problems to someone who you want to go through as the speaker, and you can easily target them and oppress them. How? By making sure that they don't pick up nomination forms. How? By making sure that you probably harm them and stuff like that, reduce their campaign time. And it has actually just reduced political fairness, inclusiveness, and representation. But then also, it has increased identity politics, right? That is to say, there are political parties that do not basically have ideologies. They basically just subscribe to, we are from this region. It's why political parties like National Unity Platform have a stronghold in, the Buganda Kingdom or Buganda regions or central area. But then when you go to the northern side of the country, they basically do not have any kind of standing and stuff like that. They're not supported like the way they are right now. So it has basically just increased division that exists amongst Ugandans as citizens. But then also it has failed completely to increase the fairness that we thought would bring on board, the representation that we thought it would bring on board, and also the inclusivity. I beg to rest here.
Okay, thank you very much. Your time is also up. Let us hear from Kabale University, represented by Kayua Ashraf. Ashraf, your 3 minutes also start now.
Thank you so much. The main importance of these electoral reforms, as we may say, it was to create an openness and rectify all the issues that had been an error to the past areas and past regimes. But however, I would not be surprised to say it was like just maybe, what can I call it? I'm looking for a better term to term it. But then, as Professor Mwebesa was saying, it has now opened us to being participated other than participating. Because now these electoral reforms brought in these special interest groups, where we have the youth, the women, the people with disabilities. But me, I look at it as an open way whereby the government wanted to feel us engaged, or to make us part of their games. And because now, look at the recently concluded youth elections. It was more of a money game. We are just enjoying cash, I can tell you that. Because the best thing you would do, it would just go there, bag your 500. Imagine, just instead of looking for a leader who has capacity and capabilities, the best thing was to do, it is to go there, reach Kororo, get your card, go back home with bags of money. But then, and all these issues should have been addressed by these, were brought in by these electoral reforms, whereby we felt like we want to bring the youth on board. But now, these youth are now the most, I'm sorry to say, we are the most vibrant and arrogant people that disrupted all the elections there. Because I remember when the national entrepreneurs were about to vote, a certain candidate, I will not divulge the details, was looking for youth who were delegates to come over and create havoc so that maybe the election will not happen that day. And instead of being the very people to advocate and have free and fair elections and maybe have equal representations, if I may ask, if we are here, who can tell me a Western youth, a youth MP for their area? The last day you will see them, it is the day they are coming to your area to vote. The only way I think they have is to go there in Parliament, have their interests satisfied. You will never get them. I just saw my Western Youth MP one time on the floor of Parliament, Edward Rugumayo, only once in 5 years. He has never appeared again. He appeared again when I saw him campaigning in his home area. And then we expected these people to have come on board, to have us represented, to have our issues said out. But now, it has now even come of more of state mafiaism, whereby now, who is who? Who is who? You find it is our election, but the cash is being splashed out by the state mercenaries. You don't support this, you don't support this. Case in point, may I think these reforms which brought in the SIGs did more harm than good in a way. Because I remember, I personally was a victim. How can you tell me that as someone, you give money to someone to come and contest, but on the voting day you find even the returning officer is not at the ground. Reason being, the people have been given money and they have to go away. So why did we bring in this? We wanted to bring in fairness, but then how can you bring in fairness when the Electoral Commission itself, it is appointed by the person whom you expect to remove from power?
Okay,
thank you so much.
Your time is up, Ashraf. We move now to Mbarara University of Science and Technology, represented by Muhanji Edward. Edward, the microphone is yours, and you have 3 minutes starting now.
All right, thank you. I think for clarity, I will start by highlighting the key reforms that have happened. Number 1 was removal of age limit. Number 2, remove the term limit. And 3, introduction of the multi-party system. To summarize it all, I'm going to show you how all these reforms have achieved one single thing, and that is mocking democracy. Number 1 on ideal multi-party systems, which is a reform, right? One thing they have brought about is the idea of inclusivity in the way that maybe any person can form a political party and contest, right? But 2, the same reforms have brought about the idea whereby they are still being controlled by the incumbent ruling party. It looks like there is still oppression of these upcoming other individuals. In simple terms, what you achieve at that point is you just bring on board people to kind of play around with them, but not to guarantee them what they are looking for. But 2, on the idea of age limit. Age limit looks like you have to allow someone to run for presidency not until maybe they feel like they are tired or when they die. The achievement of that is, number 1, you kind of create a system, it has created a system whereby one person has been favored to understand that maybe he can run for presidency, you can rule any organization or any country, not until he wishes right now I'm tired, or maybe death can do me apart from this. But 3, about the idea of removal of the term limit. It looks like someone can literally serve until they feel like they are tired. That is wrong, because that is not democracy. Democracy becomes better if you buy into the interests of the people. Most of these reforms that have come up have not respected the interests of the people, because that's why we see most people have come up to question the idea of age limit. Most people have come up to question the idea of maybe the term limit. Most people have come up to question the idea of inclusivity on how individuals or political parties are favored during elections. To sum it up, I think you can literally see that most of these reforms by the EC have achieved one major role. Number 1, they have mocked democracy because they have closed out on fairness. You can't be fair when you allow a single individual to run until they feel like dying. You can't be fair when you oppress other political parties that you think you have favored by allowing them to participate. But 3, you can't achieve inclusivity if you don't allow individuals to vote. For example, like civic engagement or other people, they're going to show you maybe some given youth are not allowed to vote because maybe of how maybe they conduct themselves or how they act in that kind of regard. But 4, you can't achieve representation if at all you still favor the incumbent leaders. To say most of these reforms kind of favor the people that are in power. That is to say, they give them the media, they give them the security and stuff like that. So most of these reforms have not actually achieved the fairness that people deserve. Why? Because they have gone against the interests of the common people on the ground. To say, most people have complained about them, but nothing has been bought into. So that is not how democracy runs. lastly, I'm going to show you maybe the key thing that maybe like the lesser extent that, oh, my time is done. Okay, thank you.
So your time is up and we have to move, but there was a question, there was a hand up for you. Was it a question or point of information?
Just for the record, I stand.
And make it brief.
Yeah,
please.
I will. I think that we need to also establish one thing, that electoral reforms in and of themselves are usually backed by democratic reason, right? And the way they are bathed out is usually that way. And when you say that the removal of the term limits was actually an electoral reform, I think that we need to establish a difference between a constitutional amendment and an electoral reform. So when my colleague here says that the removal of the term limits was an electoral reform, I think that that was detrimental to democracy, and therefore it would not be something that is improving democracy, and by and large that alone negates it from being an electoral reform to a constitutional amendment. I think you can set that right.
1 minute.
Okay. I'm going to show you how this leads to the electoral reform. How? Because removal of the term limit in and of itself affects the electoral processes in a given country. That is why I've brought it out to show you removal of the term limit directly affected how the Electoral Commission runs its processes. So you can't come and tell me that it is wrong, absolutely wrong for me to take it as a reform, because either way, it is affecting how the country or how the system used to run its own elections. Then you have to prove to me how then this is parallel from the electoral systems of a given country. Simple.
Okay, let's move on to Mountains of the Moon University.
Thank you,
Kagoro
moderator.
Enoch.
Thank you, moderator.
Your 3 minutes start now.
Thank you, moderator. Number one, electoral reforms and then constitutional amendments and stuff like that. There should be a difference. Now, whether they impact or not, there should be a difference. But what are the electoral reforms in this case? The introduction of the multi-party system, the introduction of EC, the parliament and judiciary, and those other reforms that come to affect directly how electoral processes run. But also let's establish, why are these reforms put in place, or why did they come in place? We should primarily understand that these reforms come to bring in representation, fairness and inclusivity. And therefore the question for today is, have they achieved the same? Let's look at the multi-party system introduction in the first case. Multi-party system introduction, 2005. But how has that helped the country? 2 weeks back, I was in Mbarara. In Mbarara City, you can hardly see, even when you can hardly see a red poster of NOP. What does, and that happens also in Kampala region now, central region. You can hardly see a yellow poster. What does that mean? You can, but you can hardly see. Hardly see means you can see it, but it becomes very difficult when you compare it to the other parties. Now that is bitter truth. But on the other hand, what causes all this? What causes all this? Because these multi-party systems have come with a particular interest of the different parties.
Let's have order, please. Let's have order and allow
Have come with particular interests of particular parties. People are bringing in parties. Now, people in the central are now using that kind of region to establish parties such as NOP. But also parties such as DP have also risen because of particular maybe religions, maybe these are for Catholics and these are for these particular kinds of parties. But also how has that helped? In my region, moderator, for example in Fort Portal City, the current concluded youth elections, what happened is the people that went through the NRM primaries were directly adopted by the EC. What does that mean? It is NRM, which is the National Youth Council at that point. What does that mean, moderator? That simply means that even when we have these multi-party systems, they're not actually what they portray they are, but just rather a mask that portrays that we have a multi-party system that brings in inclusivity. But it's not that. So inclusivity at that point has not been achieved. But also let's look at representation. Like I told you, moderator, in the year 2005, we had the Honorable Beatrice Keraso covering areas of Kabarole, Bunyangabu, Ntoroko, Kamwenge, Chenjojo, Chegegwa. But in 2005, we feel we are more represented than we are represented now by over 30 MPs in the same region. Now look at the Fort Portal Kampala Road. 5 years, the road is now becoming impassable. Some of us have to travel at night such that we sleep and we do not feel the potholes. It is becoming impassable. But what do we have? We have over 30 MPs. So if it is about the numbers, but not the representation. And that does not yield, I think, the fact and the primary reason of these things. But we also look at the EC and now the parliament that were introduced. Let's look at the their independence. Is it by constitution? Thank you.
I know 3 minutes do run very, very fast. And it's 9:33. We have to be done by 9:45. So we'll run very fast to our last question. But before we do that, there was a hand, 2 hands up for you. Yes, just pass the mic. Okay, you can start. Maybe you can start and then we move. Yeah, he starts.
Okay, thank you so much, my brother. But I want us to just get guided on this issue of the NYC, the National Youth Council, whereby you're claiming that NRM, those people that passed at the district level went elected to the NYC. But by now, you have to know, maybe if you were not part of that process, NRM had the highest number of delegates from the district level, and that's why they say it attributed over 98% of the National Youth Council seats. Reason being, it was vibrant at the grassroots level. So it was very obvious because I think NUP had and other political parties had a very minimal and a very negligible representation. So that's why that's obvious. So I think that should not be debatable because it had the largest percentage, and therefore they would not send someone that did not pass through because maybe his FDC is what and what. Meaning the people down in the grassroots supported the NRM 98%, and that's why they sent them to NYC. Thank you so much.
Let him respond. Let him respond.
I am glad to be seated with one of them from NRM. What my argument is not about who goes through, but my argument is about the process, the electoral process, and how it influences now. The fact that you say NRM had the biggest number of representatives, no, that's not the issue. But the issue is about how they get adopted into the NYC structures. It becomes wrong when you say that those that pass through NRM are directly adopted because they have the majority and because they are the grassroots and whatever. That's not how the electoral process is supposed to run. But rather, let's have them come up. Let's have an electoral process run, and let's have this voted, whether they're independent, NRM, or whoever. But let them be voted because I believe NYC is independent from NRM, and we should distinguish those two bodies. That is my entire point. Thank you.
Okay, Gulu University.
Okay, I've noticed how he has answered the past 2 questions. It looks like he has a problem with the decentralization of power. That is to say, the division of districts into smaller areas where power is decentralized and sent back to like the lower people at a smaller scale. And I want to find out how that is actually a problem. Actually making sure that power is closer to the people is a problem to like the democratic processes of a country. That is one. And then secondly, I also want to find out why he believes that it's his MP that is supposed to, you know, construct the road in this area.
No, you can keep the microphone back.
Thank you. I'll start with the second. Why I believe it's not about the MP constructing the road. We're looking at the representation. Representation means talk for us. Talk about what pains us. Do they do that? I told you in the past 15 years, we felt more represented with 3 MPs than we feel represented when we have 50 MPs. Now look here. What do these MPs come to do? What do they come to do? What do they talk in Parliament? If somebody goes and, for example, we had now the Honorable Margaret Muhanga. When the minister came around, she said, look here, we have traditional schools that are going down, such as this and this and this. And the minister took it up to renovate the traditional schools in Rwenzori region. Now, what does it mean if MPs in that area were doing the same thing, or if they're advocating for those common factors? What would it happen? It's not about, it's not them to construct, but it is about representation. Are we feeling rightly represented? That's the question. That's the question in this context, and that's what we should be answering. Now, number 2, you talked about power being closer to the people. Yes, like you stated it clearly, like my brother from Busitema stated it clearly. It's power being closer to the people, but is it actually closer to the people? That's the question. Now, what is happening right now is that we have a variety of MPs in Parliament, but what do they do? Before you people understand that before a decision is taken in Parliament, there is SEC sitting somewhere, a certain party's SEC sitting somewhere, which informs how particular MPs or MPs that subscribe to that particular party should decide in Parliament, and that is the democracy now. Now, the democracy is informed by an individual chairing SEC somewhere, or particular people chairing SEC, that influences how MPs that subscribe to the party should decide for the people they represent. Now, the loyalty is unto the party and not unto the people they represent. That's the problem in the context. So power is not actually closer to the people.
Thank you. Busitema.
I think just to reinforce what he has just said, first of all, we must establish. Yeah,
okay.
It's going to conclude that. We must establish that from the far left of this panel, we have a conflict between the absolute truths and how systems are supposed to run versus how the sentiment of how they are running has corrupted their ideation. Now, you see, when you look at a system that you are trying to, let's see what is happening right now, that cannot give us a clear direction of where we are going to. So when you try to pitch these things against what the absolute truths demand, that is when you find a clear variation. When you talk representation and decentralization, I think that we must establish that this representation is supposed to be representation in government and government policies rather than it is to individuals and to individual political parties. I also think that decentralization in and of itself cannot be a cancer, and therefore that burden should not be shifted to the member of parliament to suddenly get out of his pocket and start filling the potholes. I think that that representation should be directed to the government and not necessarily to the person that is representing, that is not necessarily to a political party or the people that he's actually representing.
You can keep the microphone there.
I think the problem, let me make this crystal clear now. We're not saying that these MPs should touch in their pockets to do this and that and the other. But we're saying, are we feeling rightly represented if the things they advocate for or the things they say they're advocating for, if they actually advocate for them, are not being done? Like I told you, if somebody has to advocate for a road, have they actually advocated for roads? We're looking at having a parliament of about 500 MPs, about 500 MPs, but how many actually talk in that parliament? All right, how many people are actually talking that parliament? Do they actually do that? If they do not do that, then the people that are supposed to do it are not told, because these people are supposed to be there as our voices, they're our mouthpieces, they're supposed to talk for us. They're supposed to inform the people that are supposed to do these things. If they do not do that, then they're not doing their work. And that way we're not feeling represented, we're not feeling included, and therefore the decentralization becomes irrelevant. Because what for if you cannot represent a small area and talk of its problems that affect it and they're worked upon, then the representation becomes irrelevant. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much. And now on to our third and last question. I want us to look at the role that electoral violence and voter intimidation have played in shaping Uganda's democracy. What role has electoral violence and voter intimidation played in shaping Uganda's democracy? What role has electoral violence and voter intimidation played in shaping Uganda's democracy? What role has electoral violence and voter intimidation played in shaping Uganda's democracy? Are we ready? Okay, and that's why I said we keep the microphone on the other side. So,
I invite you all to
just a minute, let me set the time for you.
pay attention.
Your time starts now. 3 minutes.
I invite you all to pay attention closely. Let us understand what democracy is. Democracy, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, at its inception and purity in Greece, was actually supposed to be the representation of the majority's will. You understand that what we are, and up to now, ladies and gentlemen, that is what democracy is, even in Uganda, that we are still talking about numbers. However, now the problem is that now democracy has now, the will of the people is now, it can now be manipulated, it can now be bought, and that is the cancer that has eaten up the reliance on the purity of the democracy and the majority rule. Two, ladies and gentlemen, let us understand a typical Ugandan person. A typical Ugandan here today, when they find a wallet at the ground, the first thing they are going to do is not to announce it, they are going to keep it for themselves. That implies the kind of selfishness that we all have. Let us understand, ladies and gentlemen, that because of the politics that we are in today, that has become a business that belongs to the highest bidder. The one that can best become the highest bidder takes it all. That is why today the military can now come in and oppress the persons, because the highest bidder can cause them to. And if they can do that for him, then the will of the people can be bought. The democracy can be compromised. Let us understand, therefore, that the issue of the issue, first of all, of how this intimidation and violence has come in is not just because it has come in to do something else. It is because it is backing our selfishness and our greed as a country and as a person. So, ladies and gentlemen, the issue of how this electoral violence, where we see the opposition being beaten, being denied the support of their fellow candidates, being denied access and campaign on the right paths, is not because they are just being denied. It is because it is against the one who wants to become the highest bidder, and therefore they will use all measure possible to frustrate the opposition that would rather compromise on that ideation. Let us also understand, ladies and gentlemen, that the idea of voter intimidation has in turn therefore caused the persons to only come in to, as an idea of consent rather than it is of choice. They are now here to cast ballots in a bid to establish that which has already been laid out. And that alone compromises the will of the people and therefore undermines democracy as a whole. Second, ladies and gentlemen, you'll understand that the role here is that persons have lost, have now lost their trust in the political system or in the electoral ballot, knowing that up to 8 million of the 18 million that were supposed to vote in the last general elections actually did not vote. The reason, therefore, that comes in for that is the fact that they feel that after all, and ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you of is it Honorable Rukutana who went to a polling station with a gun? Now, everyone that was in the opponent's line will now shift to this gentleman's line for fear of their lives, and because they do not want to bet that, they would rather stay at home, and that means that we cannot achieve democracy and the majority rule.
Thank you. Your time is up. Gulu University, again, wrote Alicia. 3 minutes start now.
Okay. Basically, we all know for a fact that electoral violence and voter intimidation is something that is meted out by like the armed forces of the country, right? That is to say the policemen or the army. But then here's the thing, according to Article 208, these guys are supposed to be non-partisan. They are supposed to protect the citizens regardless of the party that they subscribe to, regardless of their race, religion, and stuff like that. But then also, there is a necessity for these people or the armed forces of the country within the electoral processes. That is to say, we need them to protect the democratic processes or the things that happen during elections. That is to say, we need them to protect us from things like ballot stuffing and things like that, right? That means that we need them at these polling stations. But then again, here's the catch. These people are here, they go to these polling stations, but then they're kind of partisan. They mete out violences, but these violences are not against like literally everyone. They're violences against people that have different ideologies from the government, because most of the times we don't need the army at a polling station, but they're there. There are violences against, opposition politicians, arresting them, making sure that they do not go to campaigns. On voting days, we have like, the arrest of polling agents and stuff like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and show you why now this is actually very problematic to the electoral process. One is that it reduces or disincentivizes people to participate in the entire electoral process. Why? Because at the end of the day, when you're afraid of your life, right? Like, what if I go to a polling station and then, I end up dead and stuff like that because there's an armed man with a gun there. But then also, it necessarily makes you lose trust, like you said, in like the entire electoral process. Like, even if I go there and I vote, what if they're just going to carry ballots and then, end up counting in favor of like another person and stuff like that. The arrest of polling agents is also problematic. Why? Because it reduces the whole transparency that we demand for every democratic process, for us to actually believe that it was actually democratic in the entire, along the entire journey. Because now if you're arresting someone's polling agent, it necessarily means that it doesn't, there's going to be no one to prove that the votes that you have counted was probably correct, or the votes of his opponents were probably correct and he rightly lost or he rightly won and stuff like that. But then the most important argument that I'm going to bring today is like the argument of choice. Like, democracy basically capitalizes on people's choice. It capitalizes on people's agency. Why then does voter intimidation and violence reduce choice? Remember that one, you are arresting someone because you have different ideologies, right? You're putting him in jail and stuff like that. That reduces like the number of days that he spends on his campaign track. That reduces the amount of people that he reaches to tell them about his manifestos, to tell them about how he impacts their life or changes their lives for the better. That necessarily means that even if these people are going to make choice, you have actually reduced the pool of options that they have. You get, like, you have reduced that, if there is a pool of options of politicians who promise, to do good things, you have reduced the number of people that could tell them the good things that, they're going to do influence their lives positively. And that then necessarily means that at the end of the day, you have people voting, but then they do not actually vote for like the best thing that they could have possibly voted for if they had like the entire, you know, politicians or the entire lot of politicians campaigning to them.
Thank you. Time is up. Kabale University, Kayua Ashraf, you have 3 minutes, starting now.
Thank you so much for that good question. Still, I would have to still say democracy is the rule of the majority over the minority. But now, we are now seeing that the minority are ruling over the majority in very many contexts, as we can see. How? Because now we have seen that a certain specified group of people have been given all the weapons, and then we, the majority, who should be favored by the so-called democracy, have been sidelined in the rubbish pits, if I may say. Of course, now, voter intimidation and electoral violence. This question is a bit paradoxical, if I may, because there is always alternating in a way that, because there is no how you can tell me that this electoral violence and voter intimidation has played a role in the far away. I cannot ever go in line with that, in a way. I have, because me, when I'm speaking, I have to be factual and give out things that we all have seen. We see a reason where someone goes to the polling station with over a military tank, it is more of a front line than a voting area. Even if you give me, 1,000 millions, what and what, I can never appear at that polling station, because my life comes first. I have to give we have to be very honest. We see the recently concluded elections. We saw whereby various deaths were registered. We saw in Rwanda where we registered a death before even the night of announcing the elections. But however, it even favored the biggest part because the elections were in the neck of a certain area MP I will not mention. But after the death, after gunshots, what, and I think it is provided in the constitution that the army should not even have a hand in that in that election. But we see these ministries, and maybe I think it is because most of us or some of us come from regions where we have some big wigs, whereby a rally is full of military personnel than people that should be there. Now, you reach at the polling station or anywhere, you find like guns are welcoming you, you find the best way is to go home and see what has been happening. So, and this has reduced the turn-up, because me, I think, I have friends there who have been telling me that I can never appear at any polling station, and we expect more to happen in the coming elections, because there is no way how someone is showing the real colors in the primary elections, and you expect that person will be able to lose in the coming elections. And then now, we still now look at this in this angle. Whereby at times because I believe we have a right to revolt or to make peaceful demonstrations if we are not happy with the electoral results. But however, that has been deterred. Just get a placard and say maybe Museveni must go, and you just pass by a certain police station. I'm very sure by one you'll be behind bars. And now, what is the use of that?
Thank you. Thanks, Ashraf. Your time is up. We move now to Mbarara University of Science and Technology. Muhanji Edward, same question for you. What role has electoral violence and voter intimidation played in shaping Uganda's democracy? And your 3 minutes start now.
All right. I think someone wouldn't be wrong if they said electoral violence and voter intimidation have painted Uganda's democracy as a failed system. Why? Because from the past, that is to say from 1980, whereby soldiers stuffed ballots to keep Obote in power, from 1966, whereby soldiers again decided who to win, it looks like from past up to right now, we see that this kind of intimidation has decided on who has won even before people choose. What has electoral violence achieved? Number one, electoral violence looks like the allegations of ballot stuffing, the allegations of people being denied a chance to vote and stuff like that. What this has done is that it has made our democratic system look like a system that can't stand on its own truth. To say that there has not been anything like to kind of check things like that out. Two, voter intimidation looks like our democratic system has allowed us to paint an election as a modern war. That is why we have always seen entire barracks being deployed during election time. This kind of looks like, number one, this all intimidation makes an election look like a war. That's why of recent we saw in Kawempe an entire barracks being deployed just for a by-election. that looks like, number one, once you create that form of intimidation, you deny people a chance to stand out. Maybe on intimidation, to make it like kind of look how it happens. Number one, there are allegations down there in districts of, for example, Chankwanzi and Zimbabwe, whereby people have always come up to speak about what soldiers do down there. It doesn't stop at a soldier coming at a polling station, but rather it goes on to a soldier telling you on where to tick or who to vote, to understand that maybe people are denied their kind of democratic right to choose on their entire leader. That intimidation has achieved three things. Number one, it has deterred people from leaving their homes to go to voting. But two, it has enabled people to vote the wrong leaders. Because if I go to polling station and you tell me, vote someone because I have a gun there, that would be wrong. A clear example of this, there have been allegations of Chikube, whereby Honorable Peter Banura, a son to Mateo Kaligonza General, has always been winning. Why? Because their father has been influencing people to vote. That's an allegation that people have not come to check up, and maybe once don't check on that stuff, it becomes a factual truth. The impact of that is, number one, it forces people in that kind of area to stay at home, not to go for a war. But thirdly, I'm going to show you how violence has achieved a major thing of maybe painting elections as something that's not worth it. How? Once you violate an election, you make people who are elites lose their relevance on why they should vote. That's why someone who has started a democracy, who knows how it runs, he has no incentive to go and vote, because what is the importance of me voting, yet an election is going to be violated to say there are going to be allegations of vote stuffing, or two, changing results. That makes me a fool. If I'm going to vote for someone, they win and deny them the chance to win. It makes me lose relevancy. But lastly,
time is up, Edward. But you will respond to the issues that your colleagues from Kabale University and Busitema University are raising. Ashraf, let's give you the microphone very quickly.
Thank you so much. You're saying the influx of the military personnel and other security forces at the polling grounds have influenced maybe elections results in one way or the other. But however, I would like to even to make you aware of some issue that there is no way you will tell me, I want you to convince me in a way that you say, maybe this result here was influenced by the influx of military personnel. I have to take you to Kawempe by elections. You saw it was more of a real Somalia or Iraq, Baghdad, if I may say. But that did not stop the opposition candidate from doing what? From winning. I will still take you to the 2006, to the 2001 elections. Amama Mbabazi versus James Musing's Garuga. Amama Mbabazi was the minister of, was a security personnel and had the highest command of the military. But then the election petition that came out from the Mbarara High Court showed that he was not winning. So meaning, and then still lastly, I can even take you to Captain Kahonda Donozio in Rubihinda, whereby he was even behind bars, but still the people on ground, the people had to vote the real candidate they wanted, winning a very staunch person, Mr. Kahinda Otafire. So I want you to not only base that maybe people coming out with military tanks and what can stop people from voting a candidate to the elections. Maybe still it may be a reason as to why they are not voting that very person. He is incapable or incompetent in a way or the other.
Thank you. Respond and then
it becomes absolutely wrong for you to take a snake as a good animal because it saw you and bypassed you by mistake. What he's arguing about is the whole idea of the simple sample space out of what is actually happening. What I've told you is that what the army has achieved is once you intimidate a person to an extent that there have been allegations whereby army officers in Zimbabwe, in Chikube, where they kind of tell you who to tick and how to vote, like in Chankwanza that has been happening. It becomes wrong for you to come and argue that because someone won in Kampala, that was an advantage, but either way, you don't know the fact that maybe army was there. All of us are able to see, we saw a full barracks in Kawempe. That is intimidation to a person like me who grew up knowing the army is meant to fight wars. An election has never been a war. Why do I see an army officer on a ballot box, yet I have the police who can do stuff like that? I think you are wrong. Thank you.
Busitema, and then I will also kindly request you guys to just keep it low, please. We have one debate and one debate alone in this room.
I think from what Mbarara University is saying, it is better to be given flesh, given the things that we have all highlighted as a panel and as he has said, that all these things that are happening have actually caused mistrust in the electoral process. That means, I think from his submission, we should also draw the conclusion that this intimidation and electoral violence has actually shone a spotlight on the aloofness and ineffectiveness of the Electoral Commission to its mandate. I think he can exaggerate that a little bit.
In a minute, and then we come to Enoch.
I don't think that was a question. I don't think it was a question. However, it was something different, because once you come and tell me what I've said, it becomes, I don't know how I'm supposed to answer that. Thank you.
Mountains of the Moon University, Kagoro Enoch.
Thank you, moderator.
Your 3 minutes start now.
Thank you, moderator. The electoral violence and voter intimidation in shaping Uganda's democracy. First of all, moderator, you'll agree with me that the problem starts with our very constitution, which declares the army and the other security agencies as non-partisan, but gives sovereignty of those particular bodies to a partisan president. The army, the commander-in-chief is the president. And all the other parties, the president appoints the chief justice, who presides over the judiciary. And at the end of the day, we shall have injustice rolling time and again, rolling over and over. Now, what happens is, with the voter intimidation, first of all, undermining the democratic principles. We shall look at cases of the running rallies, where we have the president, the incumbents, because the point in this is that security agencies are now rallying and paying loyalty to the people that are incumbent or the people that are ruling, because those are the people that have sovereignty over them, rather than the people that actually pay the taxes that pay these people. Now, what happens is, if there is an incumbent that is coming in an area, there is security. Now, security to guard the incumbent and also to guard the people. But if there is somebody opposing them, there is security. Security to do what? To deter crime. Now, what they do is they have the preventive arrest. Here they can arrest somebody who's going to do a crime 2 years later, because they think they will do the crime, and then they're preventing this and that in a way brings about the injustice. Now, what happens is, at the end of the day, the injustice is onto that who does not have power, but also because the Constitution has given power to a partisan to rule over the non-partisan parties that are supposed to run these elections or these processes. Now, what does this cause? We have more divisions. These are the effects that come, and that is how our democracy is being shaped. Because if a one Mugisha, a Fanda Mugisha arrests somebody from, let me say, National Unity Platform, the ideology will be, Banyankore do not want us into power. And what would that lead? It means that all the people who are not Banyankore are going to stay away from Banyankore people. And that's how division keeps breeding and breeding and breeding. But also the injustices now keep meaning that whoever has power can control power, because that's what the system has built us to be, that those that have power should control and maintain the power. And how do they control and maintain the power? By ordering those whom they have sovereignty over, who are supposed to be non-partisan, and in that lane, they become partisan. And that's how we have a low voter turnout among the effects. And the recent elections, we had just a 41% voter turnout. Because of why? Because people fear for their lives. Why would I go to vote for people who will not be declared winners? But also, I risk losing my life. I risk losing my child's life. I risk losing leaving my children orphans. That kind of intimidation, and those are some of the effects that are coming around that. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you, and you had about 5 seconds to go, but thank you very much. And no issues emerging. Okay, great. So that also brings us to the end of this group debate. The question session. We will now hear from our judges, comments, and then the award of marks, and that also wraps up the balance carried forward from yesterday, from day one, and then we shall essentially shift our focus to the activities for day two. Professor?
Once again, good morning. And I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of the judges to thank and congratulate our panelists today for having put up a spirited spirit. But the most important thing is that it is a learning exercise. We are all learning, not only learning new knowledge, but learning new skills. Because what we are doing here is about skills, but it is also about values and attitudes. So the most important thing is not whether one has scored this grade or the other one, but that we are all in a learning exercise for ourselves and also for improving democracy in the country. So thank you very much for putting up that spirited conversation that we have had and we have learned. Just allow me make just a few remarks, just in passing. Not that I am going to exhaust all that we are noting down or we are observing, but for the purposes of learning, I heard people fighting over the question of the state and the government. And I thought I needed to come in here and make some clarification, although my knowledge may not also be conclusive. But I can provoke you to go and Google or ask somebody else and add on. Because it normally confuses the state and the government. A state is bigger than government. Government is more or less like a subset of the state. And I'm not going to go into nation. There is also the question of nation. But if you talk about a state, let's define it by the composition. The army, the judiciary, all these magistrates and judges, the legislature, the bureaucracy, and the politics and the politicians, they can all belong to the state, but they don't all belong to government. Government is that subset of this apparatus of the state, of this state apparatus that is in charge of ruling. Mainly, it is the executive, but minus the security forces. That is government. So, when you say government has changed, you are not saying that the ministry, civil servants have changed. Neither are you saying that the judiciary has changed. Neither are you saying that the police has changed. So, government is bigger, state is bigger than government. And in some countries, they have got heads of state different from heads of government. For us, we have a mix, they are put into one. But in some countries, they are separated. But you could go on and find much more about that one. Somebody mentioned the bicameral system. I was curious to hear that there was a bicameral system here in Uganda in 1962. Did I hear that? I don't think we have had bicameral system in Uganda. The bicameral system is where you have got two parliaments. There is in USA you have got the Senate and Congress. Even in Kenya currently. In UK you have the House of Lords and House of Commons. But I don't think we have had that situation in Uganda. So there has never been a bicameral system of government in Uganda, except I think you are confusing the question that we had a head of state different from maybe the head of government, the prime minister then. Because in 1962 we had the prime minister, by the way, in 1962 we had a prime minister and head of state. And there has been a mistake, let me correct it historically now. I have seen it even on calendars and everywhere that Kabaka Mutesa became the president of Uganda in 1962. Wrong. That was 1963. In 1962, the Queen remained the head of state but represented by the Governor General here in Uganda. So it is Milton Obote who received the instruments of power from the colonial, the colonial state or the imperial state, not Kabaka Mutesa. Kabaka Mutesa became president in 1962 as only also just a figurehead like the Queen of England. And I have had people also make mistakes to think that Milton Obote in 1962, between 1962 and 1967, that he was like an Abanja. And 66, sorry. Milton Obote was an executive prime minister. He was not an Abanja. That is why he was heading the military and could order the military to go and attack the president. So don't think that Milton Obote was like Nabanja or Hakana Rugunda or Amama Babas. No. He was an executive prime minister who could even appoint ministers and then take them to the president to approve. So that the two are different. I think I'm taking most of your time. But let me mention this one. I hesitated mentioning it yesterday in the passing and I announced results, sorry for delaying a bit. If I were answering some of these questions, especially the question number 1, but I'm not saying that you should be me, you should have followed me, I would have given just some characteristics of elections in Uganda. Elections in Uganda have been characterized by what since independence? Some of the characteristics of these elections since independence is violence, is identity politics, which was well covered, is rigging, is militarism, is monetization and electoral corruption, is hate speech, is executive interference in elections, is authoritarianism, and the like. Now, if I gave these ones like I've given them in in 1 minute or less than a minute, then I would show how colonialism, the legacy of colonialism, is reflected in electoral violence, intolerance, monetization, militarism, hate speech, authoritarianism, and I can do it in 2 minutes. Like I have almost done it. Anyway, let's announce the results. Thank you very much once again for all you have done. I will follow the procedure my colleagues have been using. We shall begin with number 5. There were 5 panelists representing these different universities. In fact, I'm going to mention the universities. So number 5 is Master University with 63%. Number 4 is Kabale University, 64%. Number 3, Mountains of the Moon University with 68%. Number 2, Gulu University, no, we should clap for all, not for some. I was saying number 2 is Gulu University with 73%, and number 1 is Busitema University with 78%. That is the score, but I want to emphasize that all of them have passed because none is below the pass mark. And therefore, let us clap for all who have participated. Thank you all. Thank you all because they have all gone beyond the pass mark. Please, thank you for what you have done. And that is the result. Let's now go for another exercise. I thank you all for what you have done.
Let's clap for our panelists. Group 5, they've been fantastic. They've been incredible. I really enjoyed moderating this session this morning. You've been really, really brilliant young minds, just like all the other groups. So we're going to have a break of 5 minutes to stretch as we compile the list, and then we return to have our semi-finals, the first group, and then later on the second group. So feel free to get up, stretch a little bit. If you want a cup of tea or you want to grab a bite, please just go over there behind and have something. We'll reconvene in 5 minutes or so. Thank you.